So most people will look twice at something that looks a bit different to what they're used to seeing, and our brains take a little bit longer to process something that is new to us. So that might be why they might look at us for a bit too long, or something that might feel a bit uncomfortable to us. So what we might be talking about there is curiosity rather than judgment necessarily. But what can happen sometimes, that curiosity can lead people to ask questions or make comments. Some of the reasons why that might make us feel uncomfortable is more about the attention being unwarranted. And so in the same way as whether that is positive or negative attention, that can still be uncomfortable. Because of all this, it would be really natural and really common for people to want to avoid going out and avoid social situations, because that will avoid the questions and the comments and the stares that are unwarranted. Unfortunately, that comes at a cost, and that can lead to other issues such as low mood and anxiety and feelings of loss and not doing some of the things that made you feel like who you were before. So in that way, we might be trying to take control over one area of our life and feel like we've lost control of other areas of our lives. There are a few things that we can do generally that will make us feel more comfortable and confident if we do go into a social situation before we receive any comments or questions or stares. And that might be things like our posture, so walking into a room confidently, standing tall. We might be able to smile to communicate positive intentions to other people. And we might also think about our eye contact, where we're looking, so making sure that we're looking up and making eye contact with people to make ourselves feel as comfortable as possible. So one of the things with eye contact is that we might find when we enter a situation and we are particularly anxious that we make too much eye contact. And in doing that, we might be anticipating that somebody is going to ask us a question or a comment, and actually that might signal to somebody that we're in fact staring at them, and they might then ask us a question or make a comment that we don't particularly want. And that can lead us to feel more awkward in those situations. Too little eye contact, it can sometimes be communicated as there's something wrong. And so somebody might actually approach us to ask us if we're okay, or to engage in a conversation that is unwarranted or that we don't want. So it's really important that we try to get the balance with eye contact, and we don't make too much or too little. It's really common for people to deal with situations like this in one of two ways. So either to avoid those situations, to get out as quickly as possible and not say anything, or to feel like they have to say absolutely everything and go into all of the detail of what's happened to them. And both of these things can leave that person feeling really out of control, regretful, and it can feel quite unpleasant for them. With that, it's really important, firstly, that we recognise how that question or comment has made us feel, and secondly, that we generate a response that fits with us as a person, fits with how we're feeling at the time, and makes us feel as in control as possible. There's no one response or answer that is going to fit all situations, and it's really important that you realise you've got choices and options in how to manage in lots of different situations. It will depend on a number of different things and the context you find yourself in as to how you feel comfortable responding to those questions. It may be that you find using a closed response is better for you when faced with questions from strangers and people you don't know. You may feel more comfortable to use a more open response or give some details of what's happened to somebody you know a little better or someone that you trust. Ultimately, the decision about what to do and which response is best in a given situation is yours. It may help you to have some backup responses in your mind if you're met with any follow-up questions that you weren't expecting, to help you feel like you've always got somewhere to go. And again, you may find that you want to close that down later and use a closed response. So the first option that you have is to give the full account and the full story of what's happened in all the detail. And there are some advantages to that you may leave that situation feeling you've given everything and you've been transparent to the story, true to yourself. But what can also happen is that you can leave that situation having communicated more than you had wanted to give, and with that may come some unexpected emotion in the situation. You may feel more vulnerable, and you may also feel as though you've shared too much, and there might be some regret about that. One of the advantages that you might expect of telling the full story to somebody is that you get everything out and you think there's no follow-up questions or nowhere else that somebody can come back to you with. Unfortunately, it can work the opposite way, and it can elicit more interest and more curiosity from people, and you may never have told them everything, and they may want to take you further and ask more questions than you want to provide. It's important to recognise that even with people who you've known a long time, close family members or friends, that you might feel you don't want to share the full story with them, and that's okay. And it can be that you just feel more comfortable keeping that story to yourself. There may be also a part of the story you feel more comfortable sharing. It doesn't mean to say you have to give all of the story or none of the story, but there may be a part of the story you feel comfortable sharing. The alternative is that you could just give a summary. The important thing is, if you do choose to share the full story and details of what happened to you, that you do that on your terms, and that you've done that knowing that you have other options, and not because you've been pushed into it or feel that somebody's asked a question and you need to give that answer. So that might be either by diverting the conversation away from that question by saying something like, "Oh, I don't ask," or "Oh, it's a long story." Or you may feel that you feel more comfortable being more assertive and actually telling the person that you don't feel comfortable speaking about that with them by saying something like, "It's a long story, I don't want to talk about it today." You may also feel like you can be quite playful with that, depending on what your personality is or how you're feeling on that particular day, by making a joke or something like that. Sometimes it's helpful when you are diverting to ask the person a question about themselves, and that might make you feel more in control of that conversation. When we're talking about using humour, we mean more playful or comments that are light-hearted, or you would want to know, or something like that, which may then mean that there is laughter, but that can feel like that laughter is shared, and it's experienced together rather than at your expense. So one of the ways that you might feel comfortable responding is in a more general way. So you're still talking about your experience, but it's much more general rather than about your specific experience. So you might feel comfortable talking about the care you received in hospital, or the fact that you can't sit out in the sun for very long because of having experienced a skin graft, for example. You're talking about something that can be shared experience, so either an experience of sitting out in the sun or an experience of being in hospital, of something that both of you can relate to. Although, if you did choose to divert, you could divert completely away from the conversation and to say something like, "Enough about me, I want to hear about you." Again, as we were talking about earlier, you might find that the diversion doesn't work necessarily as you intended, and you're still in a conversation that you don't want to be in which case use those diversions flexibly and have some other backup responses that can get you out of that conversation if you don't want to engage with it. We've mentioned a lot of things today, and so it might be really helpful for you to consider practicing some of these things, or at least thinking about some of the responses and preparing them before you get yourself into a social situation where you are uncomfortable. You might want to do that by yourself, or you might feel there's somebody you can trust that you could ask to support you with that. Sometimes we might find people make comments about our appearance, either to us or about us, that we can find uncomfortable, or they can be genuinely unkind. It's important that you respond to those in a way that you feel more in control, but also that you are safe. In order, you can respond to that in a safe way. So you have some options. You can choose to walk away from that situation. Again, if you do that, it's important that you are feeling that that was because it was a choice to do that, and to not dignify that response with an answer, but also that in doing that you are still being kind to yourself, and you're speaking to yourself in a kind way, that comment reflects on the person that said that comment to you, and it doesn't reflect on you and how you feel about yourself. The other way that you can manage that, if you felt able to, is to address that and respond directly to that person. Again, that might depend on the situation, or it might depend on how safe you feel. But again, it's about you feeling in control of that response. So finally, we can think about how you might want to manage people staring. One of the first things that you can do is just make eye contact with that person in a deliberate way that communicates to them that you've seen and noticed that they're staring at you. They might not even be aware that they are staring, and might be embarrassed and look away themselves. Another thing you can do is distract yourself. So rather than paying attention to that person, you might want to look at your phone, or read a book or a newspaper. You might choose to be assertive in communicating with that person and ask them, do we know one another, or have I met you before? And usually that can having a conversation might make you feel more comfortable. That also might shift the discomfort onto that person and put the onus on them and the responsibility that they've been staring at you to get themselves out of that situation. Again, you could choose to do nothing and ignore the person that's staring. I think it's important that you do that as a choice, and something that you recognise you're doing and choosing to get on with your day regardless of the situation. We've talked about ways that you can handle situations where you feel out of control and are responding to other people's comments, questions or stares, but we haven't covered ways in which you might feel you want to take control in social situations yourself by being proactive. So one of the ways that you might feel able to do that is to bring up your injury yourself in conversation, or enter social situations in a much more confident way. And again, that's your choice about whether you choose to do that and in what circumstances you might want to do that. A way that you might do that is talking about a holiday and communicating that actually it can be frustrating for you sometimes about not being able to sit in the sun because you have to put factor 50 on an injury or a scar. But in doing that, it's important that you bear in mind that that could communicate to the person that you're comfortable talking about your scar and what happened, and may be followed up with further questions. And again, as long as that's something that's done on your terms, then that's okay. If you feel you need any further support, please do get in touch with a member of the Burns team, and they can make a referral to psychology for further input.